As we've seen today, Somerville is full of thoughtful, creative people doing really interesting things with their time. And it so happened that one of the residents who received the first citywide happiness survey that we sent out last year happened to be a reporter for the Christian Science Monitor. She was curious why she had received such an unusual set of questions with her census form. It's not every day you get asked, how happy are you, by your government. So the article that she eventually wrote for the Monitor, I keep it on my desk right now, and it's kind of, I see it almost as a personal challenge, but certainly a challenge to local government. City aims to boost happiness. Can it? This is the question we've been struggling with for a while now. And first of all, I want to start with a quote by Daniel Gilbert, who's a professor of psychology at Harvard and sort of a happiness guru. He said, social policies are always meant to promote things that promote happiness. So how can it be a bad idea to measure directly the very thing you're trying to maximize? Professor Gilbert was the first person we reached out to when Mayor Curtatone and Terry Acker of SomerStat decided to do a happiness survey. And he gave us some great questions. Now, it may seem strange for government to ask, how satisfied are you with your life? Yet, as Professor Gilbert explained to us, people are very astute judges of their own feelings. If you ask enough of them, you can get a sense of how happy people are with their city, their neighborhood, and even their interpersonal lives. As it turns out, Somerville is a relatively happy place. You can see that most people cluster around an 8 on this scale of 1 to 10, and the average happiness score is about a 7.5. So that puts us ever so slightly ahead of the average citizen in the United Kingdom, whose happiness survey inspired our own. One of the coolest things, though, about asking people to rate their happiness is you can take the data and compare it to a whole bunch of other data sets to see if there are any correlations. In our happiness survey, we also asked about neighborhood satisfaction, a variety of city services, and satisfaction with the city overall. And once the data were crunched, what we found is that these things were correlated. So these data give us a better sense of what sort of factors are most important to people's perceptions of their city and their sort of inner well-being. It was surprising to us how important aesthetics are, for example. This is something we hadn't pulled about prior to the survey, and it was one of the most closely correlated factors to neighborhood satisfaction. We asked people how would they rate the beauty or physical setting of Somerville. Some of the other factors are kind of things you might expect, like police, parks, walkability of your neighborhood, and even, this is a cool one, tree density. We measured the number of trees around each respondent's home and found that there was some correlation between neighborhood satisfaction and tree density. So all these things contribute to people's satisfaction with the city and therefore to their happiness. Okay, now that I've said that, though, I want to introduce a wrinkle into my argument. And this is the challenge I keep posted to my cubicle wall, the one that keeps me up at night. A city aims to boost happiness, can it? We had help from a local data scientist named Peter Heller to map around 500 of the responses. And what we found is that the relationship between city services and emotional well-being and happiness wasn't always clear-cut. So I'm going to show you some maps, and this is the key to understanding them. You'll see that I've grayed out all of the people that are in that kind of average range. So the ones that the cooler colors are lower standard deviations, and warmer colors are higher standard deviations. In other words, warmer is happier in these maps. And this is the geography of happiness in Somerville. As you can see, most people are in that average range. There's not a lot of variability, which is kind of what you'd expect if you stop to think about it. Why would people in Teal Square be a whole lot happier than people in Magoon Square? There are, however, some outliers. I went right to one of them and asked, East Somerville is one of the happy zones? So, good, I've got some East Somerville residents, Ward 1 residents. Perhaps not so surprising, but right by the 93, it's a neighborhood that's traditionally been underserved in a lot of key ways. There's a dearth of open space, people really tightly packed in. And yet this was our happiest ward in the city. This was the happiest part of the city. So you can see the difference when I compare that to neighborhood satisfaction. It had the lowest neighborhood satisfaction at like a 6.7 and the highest happiness rating at an 8.2. So where does that leave us? Given the relatively weak correlation between emotional well-being and city services, can Somerville boost happiness? Can local governments really make a difference in people's lives? Well, despite what the maps seem to show, I say yes. There is some data to back me up. We did find a correlation, as I said, between city services and happiness. Now, I've got to point out correlation obviously is not causation, so it could be that happier people just respond more positively to some of our other questions. But I think something more is at play. There have been other studies that cross geographic boundaries, and they've also found these kind of correlations between happiness and clean, well-kept cities with efficient governments. In other words, your city probably can make you happier. But ultimately, I would argue that whether or not Somerville can have an immediate impact on its residents' happiness, whether or not governments can do that, it couldn't hurt to collect this kind of data. We know all about the economy and how it impacts local markets. We collect lots of demographic statistics and know about things like childhood obesity and even airplane noise. Yet Somerville was the first city in the US to collect data on something as central as emotional well-being. In conclusion, I want to leave you with this map. This is my vision for the future. It's in addition to all the maps that show us, area median income and where foreclosures are happening and all the other important data, we'll have maps like these that show where people are the happiest. Ultimately, I'd love to see maps like this with happiness from not just state and city level, but down to your neighborhood. Social science will flourish. Mayors will seek to boost their happiness scores. People will hopefully be happier as a result. And a small city next to Boston will have led the way. Thank you.